The metal floor felt cold against David Reeves' cheek. His head pounded from whatever drug the reptilian soldiers had used to knock him out. Around him, soft crying echoed in the darkness. He pushed himself up slowly, blinking until his eyes adjusted to the dim purple glow coming from somewhere above. Crystalline walls surrounded him on all sides. Through the transparent barrier he could see others trapped in similar cages. Men, women, even children, all human, all from New Perth colony where David had been working at the medical clinic just 2 days ago. The memory came back in fragments, screaming, ships descending from the sky, scaled soldiers with weapons that froze people in place. A young woman in the cage beside him pressed her hands against the barrier. Her name tag still hung crooked on her shirt. Colony Administration Worker. She looked terrified. "Where are they taking us?" she whispered. David had no answer. He moved to the edge of his cage and looked down the corridor. Dozens more prisoners lined both sides. At the far end, massive reptilian creatures in armor stood guard. Their scales gleamed green and gold under the ship's lighting. The galleons. David had heard stories about them from traders who came through the frontier, an empire that conquered worlds and took whatever they wanted. The ship shuddered. David grabbed the wall to steady himself. Through a viewport in the distance, he glimpsed something that made his breath catch. A planet filled the view. Massive crystal mountains jutted up from its surface, catching light from a distant sun. Rivers of what looked like molten silver wound between volcanic plains. One of the galleon guards walked down the corridor, his clawed feet clicking against metal. He was tall, maybe 8 feet, with a ridge of spines running down his back. He stopped in front of David's cage and tilted his head. "Deathworlders," the alien said in surprisingly clear English. "You should feel honored. Not many get chosen for the offering." "Offering?" David kept his voice steady. Years working emergency medicine in the Australian outback had taught him to stay calm when everything was falling apart. "What offering?" The galleon's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. "To the eternal drakes, ancient dragons who rule Dracorheim. Once every 100 cycles, we bring them gifts from the species we've conquered. Keeps the peace. Keeps them from interfering with our empire." A man in the cage across from David started shouting, "You can't do this. We're citizens of the Frontier Alliance. They'll come for us." The guard laughed. "The Alliance is 3 sectors away and knows better than to challenge us over a failed colony. You're dead already. At least this way, your deaths mean something." He walked away, leaving David's mind racing. Sacrifices to dragons. It sounded insane, like something from ancient human mythology, but the fear in that guard's eyes when he mentioned the eternal drakes had been real. David looked at the other prisoners. Most were crying or staring blankly at nothing. A few looked angry, pounding uselessly against their barriers. In the cage next to him, an older man sat perfectly still, his lips moving in silent prayer. "Listen to me," David said, raising his voice enough for nearby prisoners to hear. "I know you're scared, I am too, but panic won't help us." A few faces turned toward him. The young woman with the name tag wiped her eyes. "I'm David. I was a paramedic back on Earth before I came to New Perth. Spent years in search and rescue in one of the harshest environments on the planet. I've dealt with bushfires, floods, and more venomous creatures than I can count. We're not dead yet." "We're being fed to dragons," someone shouted back. "How is that not dead?" "Because we don't know what these dragons actually want. The galleons are brutal, but they're not stupid. If these dragons just wanted food, why the ceremony? Why the specific timeline? There's something else going on here." The ship shuddered again, harder this time. Through the viewport, David could see they were entering atmosphere. The planet's surface grew closer. Those crystal mountains were even more massive than he'd thought. Some reached up into the clouds, their peaks glowing with internal light. Heat washed through the corridor as they descended. David felt sweat running down his back. The volcanic plains below radiated warmth that penetrated even the ship's hull. He'd been right to compare this to the outback. Drakarheim looked like one of the most hostile environments he'd ever seen. The ship touched down with a heavy thud. The crystalline cages flickered and vanished. David stumbled forward, suddenly free but surrounded by galleon soldiers with weapons pointed at the prisoners. They herded everyone toward a massive cargo door that was grinding open. Light poured in so bright David had to shield his eyes. When he could see again, his jaw dropped. They stood at the edge of an enormous arena carved from black stone. The walls rose 100 feet high, covered in ancient symbols that seemed to shift and glow. Beyond the arena, a volcano loomed against the sky, its peak streaming smoke. The galleons pushed the prisoners forward into the arena's center. David counted quickly. About 40 humans total. Men, women, children, all terrified, all looking to anyone for answers. The cargo door slammed shut behind them. The sound of galleon engines faded as their ships retreated into the sky. Silence fell over the arena, broken only by the distant rumble of the volcano. Then the ground began to shake, not like an earthquake, something rhythmic, deliberate, like massive footsteps approaching from below. David stepped in front of the children instinctively. His paramedic training kicked in. Assess the situation, protect the vulnerable, stay calm no matter what. The stone at the far end of the arena cracked, then exploded outward. From the opening, something emerged that made every human freeze in terror. A head the size of a transport truck, covered in scales that looked like polished obsidian. Eyes that glowed like molten gold. A neck as thick as ancient earth trees, extending up and up until a body large enough to crush buildings pulled free from the cavern. The dragon looked down at them. When it spoke, the voice crashed directly into David's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. Another offering, how tedious. 3 more dragons emerged from different points around the arena. Each was distinct and terrifying in its own way. One had scales like cut sapphire that reflected light in rainbow patterns. Another gleamed emerald green with wings that seemed almost transparent. The fourth burned with copper coloring, heat waves shimmering around its body. The prisoners huddled together, some sobbing, others too shocked to make any sound. David's heart hammered in his chest, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. Think. Observe. The dragons weren't attacking. They were just watching. The sapphire dragon yawned, revealing teeth each the length of a human arm. Do we really have to do this again, Crometh? The last batch was barely a lunar cycle ago. The obsidian dragon, apparently named Crometh, settled onto its haunches. The movement sent tremors through the ground. The galleons keep their schedule. 100 cycles, 1 offering. It has been this way for 3,000 years. 3,000 incredibly boring years, the copper dragon added. Its voice felt hot in David's mind, like standing too close to a furnace. They bring people, people scream. We send them to the valleys, repeat forever. David's mind caught on those words. Send them to the valleys. Not eat them, not kill them, send them somewhere. The emerald dragon lowered its enormous head closer to the prisoners, its golden eyes studying them with obvious curiosity. These are from Earth, Deathworlders. I heard their planet has over 300 distinct ways to die from wildlife alone. Only 300, Crometh sounded amused. How quaint. A child near David started crying louder. Her mother tried to quiet her, but the girl was too terrified. David knelt beside them, keeping his voice gentle. It's okay. Look at me, not them. Can you do that? Look right here. The girl's eyes met his. David smiled. What's your name? Lucy, she stammered. Lucy, I need you to be brave for your mom, okay? Can you do that for me? The child nodded, still trembling but quieter now. David stood and realized the dragons had gone silent. All 4 were watching him. Their attention felt like physical weight pressing down. He made a decision that was probably insane. David stepped forward, away from the group. Several prisoners grabbed for him, trying to pull him back, but he kept walking until he stood alone in the center of the arena. "Interesting," Crommeth said. "Usually they're all still screaming at this point." David looked up at the massive obsidian dragon. Meeting its eyes took every ounce of courage he had, but he did it. "You said this was tedious, that the galleons keep bringing people. Where do they go, the valleys you mentioned?" Crommeth's head tilted, a gesture that looked bizarrely human coming from something so enormous. "You ask questions instead of begging for your life. Why?" "Because begging won't help. You've done this 3,000 years. If you wanted us dead, we'd be dead already. The galleons called this an offering, but you seem more bored than hungry. So I'm asking, what actually happens to the people who come here?" The sapphire dragon made a sound like rumbling laughter. "Crommeth, I like this one," he thinks. "Rare quality in offerings," the emerald dragon agreed. "Most are too busy panicking." Crommeth studied David for a long moment. "We send them to sanctuary valleys on the other side of the mountains, safe places where they can live. The galleons believe we devour sacrifices. We find it easier to let them believe this than explain the truth. Which is that we never wanted sacrifices at all." The dragon's mental voice carried something that sounded almost like weariness. "Millennia ago, the galleons attacked this world, attempting conquest. We defended ourselves. They lost badly. To save face and prevent future conflicts, they began this ritual, bringing us gifts of lesser species to appease the terrible dragons." The copper dragon snorted smoke. "We tried explaining we didn't want their gifts. They insisted, kept bringing people anyway. Eventually we created the valleys rather than send them all back to die in galleon prisons." David felt anger building in his chest. "So you're telling me the galleons have been dumping people here for thousands of years, people who could have been free, just to maintain some political fiction?" "Essentially, yes," Crommeth said. "And you just accept it." The obsidian dragon's eyes flared brighter. "Watch your tone, Deathworlder. We are ancient beyond your comprehension. We have seen galaxies born and die. We do not explain ourselves to insects." David knew he should back down, should apologize, should do anything except what he did next. "Then stop acting like you're powerless," he said, hearing his voice echo across the arena. "You're ancient cosmic dragons. You could end this ritual any time you wanted. Instead, you're letting an empire of bullies use you as a threat while you hide people in valleys. That's not power. That's being part of the problem." Silence. The other prisoners looked at David like he'd lost his mind. The dragon stared. Then Crommeth laughed, actually laughed. The sound shook the arena walls and sent crystal dust raining down. "Verdara," Crommeth said to the emerald dragon, "did you hear this tiny creature lecture me about power?" Verdara's eyes glinted with what might have been amusement. "I did. He has spirit. Foolish spirit, but spirit nonetheless. Perhaps these Deathworlders are more interesting than previous offerings." The sapphire dragon moved closer, its massive form casting David in shadow. "Tell me, brave little human, if we are part of the problem, what is your solution?" David's mind raced. He hadn't expected to get this far, but the opening was there, and he'd spent years learning to think fast in emergencies. "Let us help. The valleys you mentioned where previous offerings live, are they thriving?" "No," Verdara admitted. "They survive, but barely. Different species struggle to cooperate. Resources are limited. Every few cycles we must intervene to prevent conflicts." "Because you're treating them like refugees instead of communities. We're not just mouths to feed. Humans are good at surviving harsh environments. It's what we do. Give us a chance to prove it. Let us go to the valleys and help organize things. If we fail, nothing changes. If we succeed, everyone benefits." Crommeth settled lower, bringing his enormous head level with David. This close, David could see his own reflection in the dragon's golden eyes. could feel heat radiating from scales older than human civilization. You would volunteer to go to a place of exile and attempt the impossible. I volunteered to work on a frontier colony medical clinic, David said. This doesn't seem much different. The copper dragon made a sound like grinding rocks. Crometh, I vote we let him try. Worst case, the valleys stay broken. Best case, we get entertainment watching him fail spectacularly. Or succeed, Verdara added quietly. Crometh's eyes never left David's face. One lunar cycle, 30 rotations of this world. Bring order to the first valley. Show us that Deathworlder adaptability means something beyond violence. Fail, and you join the chaos. Succeed, and we listen to more of your ideas. David nodded. Deal. Deal, Crometh agreed. Verdara, take him and his people to the North Valley. Let us see what humans can do when they actually try. Flying on a dragon's back was nothing like David had imagined. Verdara's emerald scales felt warm beneath him, almost like heated stone. The dragon had insisted only David ride for the first trip, promising to return for the other humans. Wind screamed past as they soared over crystal mountains that caught sunlight and threw it back in dazzling patterns. Below, David glimpsed rivers of actual silver flowing between volcanic rocks. Forests of what looked like giant mushrooms grew in impossible colors. Drakarheim was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a world that would kill unprepared visitors in 1,000 different ways. Just like home, David thought, remembering Australia's deserts and all their hidden dangers. They descended toward a valley nestled between two massive crystal spires. As they got closer, David saw crude buildings scattered across the valley floor. Smoke rose from fires. Fields lay partially cultivated but mostly wild. A river ran through the center, but the banks looked chaotic, eroded, poorly managed. Verdara landed with surprising gentleness and lowered her body so David could climb down. His legs shook when they touched solid ground. The dragon's head swung around to look at him with one enormous eye. Good luck, little human. You will need it. Then she launched skyward, leaving David alone at the valley's edge. Movement caught his attention. People emerged from the scattered buildings, not just humans. David saw species he'd never encountered before. Some walked on 4 legs, others on 2. Some had fur, some scales, some skin in colors that didn't exist on Earth. All of them looked thin, wary, suspicious. An elderly creature approached first. It stood maybe 5 feet tall on 2 legs, with pale blue skin and enormous black eyes. Its 4 arms moved in slow, deliberate gestures as it came closer. Another offering, it said in a voice like wind through leaves. Its mouth didn't move. The sound just appeared in the air. You are human, yes. We had humans here before. Most died in the first month. The rest joined the scavenger groups. I'm David, and I'm not planning to die or scavenge. The creature's eyes studied him. I am called Whisper of Leaves among my people, the Tenthari. You speak confidently for someone newly arrived. This valley will teach you humility or kill you, usually both. David looked past Whisper of Leaves at the settlement. How many live here? Perhaps 200 souls across 7 species. We do not mix, cannot mix. Too many old hatreds, too many differences. The Murith clan controls the northern sector. They are strong, take what they want. Galleons who showed mercy in battle, exiled here, hold the eastern buildings. My people, the Tenthari, we survive in the south where the crystal forests provide some protection. What about resources? Water, food, shelter? Whisper of Leaves gestured around with 2 of its arms. Water is plentiful from the river and underground springs. Geothermal vents provide heat. Crystal formations grow edible minerals. Strange fruits in the mushroom forests. Yet we struggle. Knowledge stays within groups. Trust does not exist. When crystal storms come, many die because no one cooperates on shelter. David's medical training kicked in. This wasn't so different from handling a mass casualty event. Triage the biggest problems first. When is the next storm? Perhaps 10 rotations, perhaps 20. They are unpredictable. Then that's our deadline. Will you take me to meet the other group leaders? Whisper of Leaves made a sound like soft chimes. Laughter, David guessed. They will not meet with you. New arrivals have no status, no power. Why would they waste time? Because I'm going to help, whether they cooperate or not. But it would be easier with cooperation. The Tenthari studied him with those massive eyes. You are either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, David admitted. But I'm also a medic. Do you have sick or injured? Something shifted in Whisper of Leaves' expression. The Murith leader's child, wounded in a fall 3 rotations ago, infection spreading. Their healers cannot stop it. Take me there. Whisper of Leaves hesitated, then gestured for David to follow. They walked through the settlement. David catalogued everything he saw. Geothermal vents venting steam wastefully into the air when they could be channeled for heating or power. Edible crystals growing wild, unharvested. Buildings positioned poorly, vulnerable to wind and flooding. Water flowing uselessly past instead of being stored or distributed. So much potential, so much waste. The Murith lived in the largest structure, built from black stone. They were massive creatures, easily 8 feet tall, with thick fur and muscles that suggested immense strength. 4 arms ending in clawed hands. Faces that looked almost bear-like but with more predatory features. A Murith female stood guard at the entrance. She growled when she saw David, a sound that vibrated in his chest. Whisper of Leaves brings a weak thing here. Why? He claims to be a healer, Whisper of Leaves replied calmly. For the child. The guard's expression changed. Just for a moment, David saw fear beneath the aggression. Fear for a sick child. That was something he understood completely. I don't know your biology, David said, looking up at the massive Murith. But I've treated hundreds of species working frontier medicine. Infection has certain universal principles. Let me look. If I can't help, you lose nothing. The guard stared at him, then stepped aside. If you make it worse, I will crush you. Fair enough. Inside, the building was warm from a geothermal vent running through the floor. A small Murith, maybe the equivalent of 7 or 8 years old, lay on a bed of dried moss. Its arm was swollen, streaked with dark lines spreading from a wound that looked infected. The child's breathing came fast and shallow. David knelt beside the bed, moving slowly and calmly. The child's mother stood nearby, all 4 arms tensed. David could feel her barely controlled panic. My name is David, he said softly. I'm going to examine your child. I need clean water and anything you use for sterilizing wounds. The mother brought what he asked for. David cleaned his hands thoroughly, then gently examined the wound. Deep puncture, probably from a fall onto crystal formations. Dirt and debris driven deep. Classic infection scenario. He had no proper medical supplies, but he had knowledge. David instructed the mother to heat water to boiling. While it cooled to safe temperature, he identified plants growing near the building that had antiseptic properties. Basic field medicine. The kind that had saved lives on Earth long before modern technology. He cleaned the wound properly, removing debris the Murith healers had missed, applied the plant extracts, showed the mother how to make compresses and how often to change them. The fever should break in 2 rotations if this works, David said. Keep the wound clean, give fluids, watch for the dark lines to fade. The mother looked at him with something that might have been hope. Why do you help? You gain nothing. Where I come from, healers help. That's the job. 2 days later, Verdara returned with the other humans. She found David teaching a mixed group of Tenthari and Murith how to build a proper water purification system using materials from the valley. The Murith child was sitting up, fever broken, infection receding. Word was spreading. The new human actually helped instead of taking. Grace Chen studied the geothermal vent with an engineer's eye. She'd been a systems engineer on New Perth, designing power distribution for the colony. Now she crouched in the dirt on an alien world, but the principles remained the same. Heat was heat. Energy was energy. "We can channel this," she said to the three Tenthari watching her. "Run pipes made from crystal formations. Heat water, create steam, drive turbines. You have everything needed right here." Whisper of Leaves translated her words into gestures the others understood. One Tenthari, whose name meant something like builder of homes, clicked its arms together excitedly. David watched from across the valley, satisfaction warming his chest. In 5 days, his 40 humans had scattered across the settlement, each finding ways to contribute. Roy, the medic, ran a clinic treating anyone who came. Teachers organized schools where species taught each other their knowledge. Engineers helped improve buildings and infrastructure. But the real change wasn't the physical improvements. It was something harder to measure. A Gallian exile named Krenth sat near a fire with 2 human soldiers, sharing stories of battles fought and lost. The humans had fought against Gallian raiders before their capture. Krenth had been exiled for refusing to kill civilians during a raid. Common ground found in unexpected places. Murith children played with human children, the size difference making games creative instead of impossible. Tenthari taught humans which plants were edible, which crystals safe to touch. Humans showed Tenthari field medicine and basic engineering. Barriers were falling, not quickly, not easily, but falling nonetheless. "You make this look simple," Whisper of Leaves said, appearing beside David with characteristic silence. "It is not simple." "No," David agreed. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Every day is convincing people to try something different, to trust just a little bit more." "The storm comes soon. 3 rotations, perhaps 4. I feel it in the crystal resonance." David had learned to trust the Tenthari's sensitivity to the planet's natural rhythms. "Then, we need to finish the shelter today." The shelter was David's biggest gamble. He proposed a unified structure large enough to hold everyone in the valley, built using knowledge from all species. The Murith provided strength for heavy construction. Tenthari understood crystal formations and could guide the building to resonate with the environment rather than against it. Gallian exiles contributed military engineering knowledge. Humans brought adaptability and the experience of building in hostile environments. Getting everyone to work together had taken every bit of diplomatic skill David possessed. The structure stood at the valley's center, built around and over several geothermal vents that would provide heat during the storm. Crystal formations had been shaped and grown, guided by Tenthari techniques David barely understood. The result looked organic, like the planet itself had decided to offer protection. The Murith leader, whose name was Thunderpaw, approached David. The massive creature's child, now fully recovered, walked beside her. "The Eastern clans still refuse to enter the shelter," Thunderpaw said. "They say it is a trap, that the different species will turn on each other when confined." David had expected this. Fear ran deep. "And what do you think?" "I think my child lives because you helped without asking for anything in return. I think Tenthari and Murith worked together for the first time in 300 cycles. I think if the storm catches the Eastern clans outside, they will die. But I cannot force them inside." "No," David agreed. "Force creates resentment. They have to choose." That evening, David called a gathering. He'd learned that different species preferred different times and environments, so he scheduled it at dusk when temperature and light satisfied everyone. Nearly 100 creatures assembled, though the Eastern clans stayed conspicuously absent. "I know you're all wondering if this shelter will work," David began. He spoke in simple words, letting those who understood translate for others. "Honestly, I don't know. I've never faced a crystal storm, but I know this. Separated, you've lost people every storm for years. Together, we have a chance." A Gallian from the Eastern clan stood up, scales gleaming red in the fading light. You speak of togetherness, human, but your species fights itself constantly. What makes you qualified to lecture us? David nodded. You're right. Humans war with each other. We make terrible mistakes. We let fear and hate divide us. That's exactly why I know togetherness is hard. It goes against every instinct that says protect only your own. But I also know that humans have built cities where thousands of species live side by side. We've created alliances that span solar systems, not because it's easy, but because the alternative is everyone dying alone. He looked around at the assembled creatures. The dragons gave me one lunar cycle to prove humans could help here. We're 10 days in. The storm will hit in 3 or 4 more. After it passes, I invite the dragons to see what we've built. Not just the shelter, the community, but that only works if we all survive. Whisper of Leaves stood, all 4 arms spread wide. I am old. I have seen 40 storms, lost friends and family to each one. This is the first time I believe we might all live. The human speaks truth. Together we have a chance. Thunderpaw rose next, her massive form imposing in the twilight. My child lives because a human cared about a Murith. I will stand with them in the storm. One by one others stood. Not everyone, not the eastern clans, but enough. The storm arrived 3 days later, announced by a sound like the planet itself screaming. David stood at the shelter entrance, watching the sky turn purple and black. Wind began to howl, picking up crystal dust that glittered and cut anything it touched. Final call, he shouted over the rising noise. Anyone who wants shelter, come now. The eastern clans stayed in their buildings. David saw faces watching from windows, scared faces, proud faces, faces that chose isolation over trust. Then the storm hit for real. Crystal shards began falling from the sky, some the size of human fists, others larger than vehicles. They didn't just fall. They flew sideways in the screaming wind, smashing into anything exposed. The sound was deafening, like the universe trying to tear itself apart. Inside the shelter, 200 beings from 7 species huddled together. Geothermal heat kept the temperature stable. Crystal walls, shaped by Tenthari expertise, resonated with the storm instead of shattering. Human engineering had created air circulation that prevented suffocation. Murith's strength had built foundations that didn't shake despite the assault outside. David moved through the crowd, checking on everyone. A human teacher sat with Tenthari children, telling stories to distract them from the noise. Roy treated minor injuries, aided by a Murith healer sharing techniques. Grace monitored the geothermal systems with a team of mixed species. Hours passed, the storm raged, but inside separated species began talking, sharing food, comforting each other's children. Fear broke down barriers faster than speeches ever could. After 14 hours, the storm ended. Silence fell like a physical thing. David opened the shelter entrance carefully. Outside, devastation, trees shredded, smaller buildings damaged or destroyed. Crystal shards covered everything. The eastern clan buildings were badly damaged. Bodies lay in the rubble. Not everyone had survived their isolation. Thunderpaw stood beside David, looking at the destruction. We lost 3 in here, elderly ones whose hearts gave out from stress. The eastern clans lost 22, maybe more. David felt the weight of those deaths. We can't force people to accept help. No, but we can offer it now. Rebuild their structures, treat their wounded, show them again that together is better. David nodded. Let's get to work. Verdara landed in the valley exactly 30 rotations after she'd first brought David. The Emerald Dragon's arrival sent everyone scrambling. Memories of initial terror hadn't completely faded, but David noticed something different this time. People weren't hiding. They were curious. The dragon folded her wings and surveyed the valley. Her golden eyes widened slightly, the most expression David had seen from her. Interesting, Verdara said, her mental voice touching everyone present. Very interesting indeed. David approached, trying not to show how nervous he felt. A month of success could be destroyed in moments if the dragons weren't impressed. "You asked us to bring order," David said. "How did we do?" Verdara's head swung in a slow arc, taking in everything. Fields now organized in efficient patterns, each tended by mixed-species groups. The central shelter still standing strong. Buildings rebuilt better than before, incorporating techniques from multiple species. Water systems distributing resources fairly. The geothermal power station Grace had built, now providing heat and basic electricity. "You did not bring order," Verdara said finally. "You built a community. There is a difference." Thunderpaw stepped forward, her massive form somehow less intimidating than the dragon's. "The human speaks for us all. We request the Drake Council hear what we have accomplished." "Oh, they will hear. Crometh in particular will find this fascinating." Verdara's eyes settled on David. "The others are coming. They will want to see this themselves." Within hours, all 4 dragons arrived. Crometh's obsidian form cast shadows across the valley. The sapphire and copper dragons landed on crystal spires flanking the settlement. Their combined presence should have terrified everyone. Instead, the valley's residents gathered to present what they'd built. Whisper of Leaves spoke for the Tenthari, Thunderpaw for the Murith. Krenth represented the Galleon exiles. A human named Sarah spoke for Earth's people. Each described not just physical improvements but something deeper: trust built, knowledge shared, children of different species learning together. Crometh listened to it all in silence. When the presentations finished, the ancient dragon's gaze fixed on David. "You were given an impossible task and succeeded, more than succeeded. You have done what we could not in 3,000 years. United the unwilling, given hope to the hopeless, created something new from broken pieces." "It wasn't just me," David said quickly. "Everyone here contributed." "True, but you were the catalyst, the one who chose to help instead of survive, who saw potential instead of problems." Crometh paused, exchanging looks with the other dragons. "There are 11 more valleys across Drakorheim. All struggle as this one did. All need what you have built here." David felt his stomach drop. "You want us to help the others?" "We want more than that." The sapphire dragon moved closer, its crystalline scales catching sunlight. "Ancient law allows for rare appointments. When one unites the divided, they may speak for the voiceless. You have earned that right." "I don't understand." Crometh's voice resonated with power and ancient authority. "We name you Drake's herald, mediator between our kind and the lesser species, ambassador with authority to negotiate, to build, to create policy." David's mind reeled. "I'm a paramedic. I'm not qualified to be anyone's ambassador." "You heal broken bodies," Verdara said softly. "Now you will heal broken societies. The qualification is simple. You care, you act, you succeed. That is more than most ambassadors ever achieve." "I refuse." Silence, the dragon stared. The valley residents looked shocked. "I refuse," David repeated, "because you're still treating this like a charity, like you're allowing lesser beings to organize themselves under your benevolent watch. That's not partnership. That's not equality. If you want real change, stop putting humans or anyone else beneath you." Crometh's eyes blazed. For a moment, David thought he'd gone too far. Then the dragon made that rumbling sound that meant laughter. "Verdara, did you hear that? He refuses us." "Bold," the copper dragon said. "Foolish but bold." "Or perhaps wise," Crometh countered. "He rejects hierarchy in favor of cooperation. This is unexpected." The dragon settled lower, bringing his enormous head level with David. "What would you accept, little healer?" "Partnership. Real partnership. Not Drake's herald serving at your pleasure, but king of the offered. Independent authority over all the sanctuary valleys. We cooperate with you as equals, not subjects." The valley went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Crometh studied David for endless seconds. Then the ancient dragon did something David never expected. He bowed his head. Agreed, but understand this, David of Earth. Kingship is not glory, it is service, endless service. You will face challenges that make this valley look simple. You will mediate disputes across species who hate each other for reasons older than your civilization. You will carry the weight of thousands of lives. Are you certain you want this burden? David thought of Lucy, the terrified child in the arena who needed someone to be brave. Of Thunderpaw's child, saved by simple medical care. Of Whisper of Leaves risking everything to trust a stranger. Of Grace and Roy and Sarah and all the humans who'd believed in his crazy plan. I'm certain. The other three dragons bowed their heads as well. Verdara spoke for all of them. Then by ancient law and current need, we crown you king of the Offered, ruler of sanctuary valleys, equal partner with Drakes in governance of Dracorheim. Crometh reached down with one massive claw. Between his talons, a circlet of living crystal appeared, growing from nothing as David watched. The dragon placed it gently on David's head. It adjusted itself, warm and light, pulsing with the planet's own energy. Rise, King David, Crometh said, and may you never forget that true kings serve their people, not the reverse. Celebrations erupted in the valley, but David barely heard them, because beyond the mountains, sensors had just detected something that made his new crown feel like a death sentence. A galleon war fleet was entering orbit, hundreds of ships, weapons charged, demands broadcasting across all frequencies. Surrender the human usurper, or face planetary bombardment. Admiral Krenth commanded the fleet personally, his image appearing on every screen. You have 48 hours. Give us the Deathworlder who dares claim authority over dragon domains, or we reduce your precious valleys to molten glass. The galleon's sovereignty will not tolerate insurrection. Crometh looked at David, something like respect in those ancient eyes. Your kingship lasts less than an hour before its first true test. The galleons have a fleet. We have 4 dragons. What does a king do now? David stared at the warships dotting the sky like predatory stars. His mind raced through possibilities, options, desperate plans. Then he remembered something fundamental. He was a medic. Medics didn't win through force. They won through care, through understanding, through reaching people others had given up on. We talked to them, David said. Not to their admiral, to their soldiers, to every person on those ships. We show them what's really happening here. We give them truth instead of propaganda. That will not stop missiles, the Copper Dragon observed. No, David agreed, but it might stop the people who fire them. The broadcast reached every ship in the galleon fleet simultaneously. David sat in the valley's center, a simple camera recording him. No throne, no crown visible, just a human in worn clothes speaking calmly. My name is David Reeves. I'm a paramedic from Earth. 30 days ago, I was brought to Dracorheim as a sacrifice. This message is for every soldier, every crew member, every person in that fleet. I want to show you something. The camera panned. Tenthari children playing with Murith children. Galleon exiles working alongside humans to build housing. Whisper of Leaves teaching a mixed class about native medicine. Grace showing others her geothermal power designs. The community David had helped build, thriving and real. You were told dragons demanded sacrifices. That's a lie. You were told we're dead, we're alive. Your empire has been dumping people here for thousands of years. People who could have been free, people who built this instead. David's voice stayed steady. Some of you sent family members as sacrifices. They're not dead. They're here. They're home. Do you really want to destroy that? In the fleet's command ship, Admiral Krenth slammed his clawed fist against the console. Cut that transmission. Jam it. Block it. We're trying, sir, a communications officer said nervously. It's being broadcast on frequencies we can't block. Dragon technology. They're ensuring everyone hears. Then fire anyway. Destroy the communications center. But the communications officer hesitated. Around the bridge, other galleons were watching David's broadcast, some with disbelief, others with growing hope. A weapons officer spoke quietly. "Sir, my brother was sent here 8 cycles ago. He's in that footage, alive." I said, "Fire." The weapons officer's hands remained still. "Sir, I cannot." Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Soldiers questioning orders, crew members demanding answers. Ships began breaking formation, not to attack, but to refuse. 3 battle groups moved away from Krent's command entirely. The admiral's voice turned desperate. "This is mutiny. Open fire or I will have you all executed." But it was too late. David's words had planted seeds of doubt. The broadcast continued, showing more. Thunderpaw explaining how her child was saved. Krent the exile describing the mercy that got him banished. Sarah talking about building schools where any child could learn. Krent made his choice. His command ship's weapons powered up, targeting the valley directly. If his fleet wouldn't follow orders, he would act alone. Missiles launched. 4 dragons moved as one. Crometh's body became a shield, intercepting missiles before they reached the valley. The sapphire dragon created fields of energy that deflected warheads. Verdara's precision breath melted guidance systems in flight. The copper dragon's heat aura cooked fuel before missiles could detonate. But one got through. A bunker buster designed to penetrate deep before exploding. David saw it coming, watched it fall toward the shelter where children were gathered. He ran, not away, toward. His medic training screamed that this was insane, but every instinct said protect the vulnerable. He reached the shelter entrance, arms spread wide as if his body could stop a missile. It never hit. Crometh's massive form materialized, taking the impact directly. The explosion would have leveled half the valley. Instead, it detonated against scales that had survived meteor impacts and stellar radiation. The dragon barely flinched. But something changed in that moment. Crometh, ancient and powerful beyond measure, had chosen to shield a human who was shielding others. The gesture was broadcast across every screen in the fleet. Admiral Krent found himself surrounded by his own crew. His second-in-command removed the admiral's weapon. "You just tried to kill a dragon protecting children. We're done following you." The mutiny spread like fire. Ship after ship declared independence from Krent's command. Some captains demanded he be surrendered to dragon justice. Others simply refused to participate in genocide. David stood in the shelter entrance, breathing hard, staring up at Crometh's massive form. "Thank you." "You were willing to die for them," Crometh said, something like wonder in his ancient voice. "You, who could have fled, who could have hidden. You chose to shield children not your own, of species not your kind. That's what medics do, what parents do, what anyone should do." Crometh's head lowered until his enormous eyes were level with David's. Then, impossibly, the ancient dragon bowed. Not a slight nod. A full bow, lowering his head to the ground before a human. "We have been alive for 10 million years, Crometh said, his mental voice touching everyone in the valley and every ship in orbit. "We have seen species rise and fall, empires conquer and collapse. We thought ourselves wise, but we forgot something essential. We forgot that true strength is not in power but in protection, not in dominance but in service. This human remembered what we forgot." The other 3 dragons bowed as well. Verdera, the sapphire dragon, the copper dragon, all of them lowering themselves before David and what he represented. "We do not crown you king to rule over us," Crometh said. "We crown you to remind us what leadership means, to show us that the smallest can teach the greatest, to prove that Deathworlder compassion is stronger than any empire's weapons." In orbit, the remaining loyal ships watched 4 cosmic dragons bow to a human paramedic. The sight broke something in them. Ancient prejudices, unquestioned assumptions, the belief that strength always won. Admiral Krent was transported to the surface under guard. David met him personally, flanked by dragons and representatives from every valley species. "You have a choice," David said to the admiral. "Face trial for attempted genocide or help us build something better. The Gallian sovereignty can continue being an empire of conquest, or it can join a coalition of cooperation. We're offering peace." Krenth looked at the human, the dragons, the thriving valley. Defeat was written in every line of his body. "What do you want from Gallians?" "Stop the sacrifices. Acknowledge the sanctuary valleys as independent territory. Trade with us fairly. Allow your people who want to leave your empire to join us freely." David stepped closer. "We're not asking you to surrender. We're asking you to change." The broadcast went out across the galaxy. Dracorheim, where dragons bowed to humans, where exiles built paradise, where ancient enemies became families. Other species began asking questions. If the legendary eternal drakes could change, could admit they were wrong, what did that mean for everyone else? Trade delegations arrived within weeks. Independent planets wanted to study the valley model. Scientists sought to understand how such different species cooperated. And slowly, more ships came, not with weapons or conquest, with refugees seeking sanctuary, with people tired of empire. 3 months after his coronation, David stood on a mountainside with Crometh. Below, the first valley had grown into a city, buildings incorporating architecture from 20 species, schools teaching 50 languages, markets where everyone traded fairly, and rising on the horizon, 11 more settlements following the same model. "You have changed Dracorheim forever," Crometh said. "Changed us forever. You gave me the chance. You could have ignored a paramedic's crazy ideas. We were bored and curious. You were desperate and determined. Sometimes that is all change needs." The dragon's golden eyes fixed on distant stars. "Other worlds are watching. Some will follow this example. Others will fight it. Your reign will not be peaceful." "I know." David touched the living crystal crown that had grown into part of him. "But I didn't become a medic for peaceful days. I did it to help people survive their worst moments. That doesn't change just because the scale got bigger." Below, Lucy played with a young Murith, both children laughing over a game only they understood. Grace taught engineering to a class of mixed species. Roy treated patients who came from light years away seeking care. Whisper of Leaves and Thunderpaw planned the next settlement together. David smiled. This was medicine at the grandest scale, healing not bodies but societies, not individuals but entire species relationships with each other. Hard work, endless work. Exactly what he'd signed up for. "Come on," David said to Crometh. "We have a council meeting. The Murith and Tenthari are arguing about water rights again. You enjoy this, don't you? The endless negotiations. Every time species sit down to argue instead of fight, civilization advances. So yes, I do." The dragon made that rumbling laugh. "Then let us go practice civilization," King of the offered. They descended together, ancient dragon and human healer, partners in building something the galaxy had never seen. An empire built not on conquest but on compassion, not on strength but on service. Behind them, the sun set over Dracorheim, painting the crystal mountains in colors that had no names. And across the valleys, thousands of voices from dozens of species joined in evening songs, celebrating another day survived together. The experiment continued. The impossible became possible, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, other humans looked up and wondered if maybe, just maybe, they could build something better too.